Let's talk about investing. For most people, it feels pretty chaotic. You're reacting to news, you're hearing tips, you're seeing predictions, and the result is usually just confusion and, frankly, a lot of anxiety. This explainer is about a different path. It's about a shift from all that speculation to a clear, repeatable system for building wealth over the long term. We're going to show you how to build that system. At its core, this is the fundamental choice every investor has to make. Are you following speculation, or are you using a system? You see, speculation is basically a bet on a future you can't possibly know. A system, on the other hand, is a bet on a logical framework, one that works over time no matter what the short-term noise is. So let's break down the mechanics of that system. All right, here's our roadmap. We're going to start with the core idea, then get into the 4 principles that guide the whole thing. From there, we'll look at a practical portfolio structure, talk about how to evaluate assets, and finally get to the engine that powers it all, survival and compounding. So let's start with that core idea. This isn't about which stock to buy tomorrow. It's really about building a mental model for how to think about investing. And that shift from the what to the how is probably the most critical step you can take. This is the crucial point right here. The purpose of a system isn't to perfectly predict the future. That's impossible. Its real purpose is to give you a structured way to make rational decisions based on timeless principles. And that applies whether you're investing in stocks, funds, or really any other asset class. Okay, so now we move to the foundation of the system itself. These 4 principles aren't just suggestions. Think of them as the unbreakable rules that govern every single decision within this framework. Let's walk through these principles. First, investing is capital allocation. That just means you're putting your money into productive assets, not into hype. Second, sectors are more important than stock tips. You can pick a great company, but if it's in a failing industry, it's still probably going to underperform. Third, cycles are inevitable. The key isn't trying to predict them, it's being prepared for them. And finally, time and discipline beat raw intelligence. Consistent, average decisions held for a very long time will almost always outperform brilliant short-term trades. So with those principles in mind, we can now build the actual portfolio structure. And this isn't just a random collection of assets. It's a specific architecture designed to balance stability with growth, which, as we'll see, is absolutely essential for survival and long-term compounding. And this structure is called the core satellite method. As you can see, the core makes up the biggest part, around 60 to 70%. Then the satellite is the next 20 to 30%. And finally, a small, opportunistic slice makes up the last 5 to 10%. Each of these components has a very specific job to do. So what's the role of each piece? Well, think of the core as your wealth foundation. These are stable, proven businesses or broad funds designed for resilience. The satellite is for growth acceleration, investments in emerging sectors or mid-cap leaders that have higher potential. And that small, opportunistic part, that's for higher risk, more speculative bets that, importantly, won't sink the whole portfolio if they fail. The whole structure is designed to capture upside while protecting your downside. Okay, so we have our principles and we have our portfolio structure. The next logical question is, how do we select the assets that actually go into that structure? For that, you need an evaluation engine, a repeatable process for analysis. And the process is a 2-step sequence. It always begins top-down. You always analyze the broader sector first, before you even look at a specific company. This goes right back to our second principle. Sectors matter more than stock tips. You have to understand the environment before you can understand the players in it. You know, all of that sector analysis really just boils down to this one critical question. Is the growth you're seeing driven by a temporary fad or by a long-term structural change in technology, demographics, or regulation? A system bets on those structural tailwinds, not on temporary hype. So, once we've found a sector with structural tailwinds, then we can analyze individual businesses. And here, the question has 2 parts. First, does the business have a durable competitive advantage? You know, a moat that protects its profits. And second, is it available at a fair price? This creates what's called a margin of safety, basically a buffer between the price you pay and the business's real value. Because a great business bought at a terrible price is still a bad investment. And that brings us to the final and maybe the most important part of the system. All the analysis and all the structure, it's all meaningless if you don't stay in the game long enough for the results to compound. That's why the #1 goal is simply survival. This is it. This is the system's highest priority. Before you even think about seeking returns, you have to avoid a catastrophic loss.
An irreversible loss takes you out of the game completely, and it stops that compounding process dead in its tracks. This is the first rule of risk management.
So how do you avoid getting wiped out? Well, you apply 3 core principles for risk control. First, you diversify across different sectors, different market caps, and over time. Second, you avoid concentration. You never bet too big on a single theme or a single stock. And third, you avoid all-in thinking that just exposes you to the risk of ruin.
This right here, this shows the mechanism of long-term wealth creation. It's a simple, repeatable loop. You invest systematically, using the frameworks we've just talked about. You reinvest your returns, and critically, you avoid the emotional decisions that derail the whole process. The real power here doesn't come from any single step, but from repeating this loop over and over for decades. Consistency always beats time.
Ultimately, this entire system is designed to replace prediction with a process. Wealth isn't the result of guesswork. It's the output of a system built on discipline, diversification, and compounding. That is the mental model. That is how a serious investor thinks.